I'm Keeley Taverner. I'm a psychotherapist based in the heart of Uxbridge. I help individuals to heal and move on from difficult experiences.
And I'm Malcolm Underhill, a solicitor and partner at IBB Solicitors. I specialise in acting for survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
So today it's Sexual Abuse Week, Awareness Week, and I'm intrigued to understand, why do you think this campaign is so important?
Well, there's continuing coverage of sexual abuse in the media virtually every day. But for me, there is insufficient attention given to the survivors of abuse. Each and every day we read about abusers being brought to account for their actions and being sent to prison. But there is insufficient attention given to the consequences of abuse to those victims, and that we don't appreciate, or there seems to be a lack of understanding from government and from the media that even when it stops, the abuse doesn't stop, and that people live with abuse for years and decades after their lives and find it very difficult to cope with it, something that you must find in your everyday work.
Indeed, I do. I think the legacy of sexual abuse impacts on a whole variety of ways, from careers, relationship, general well-being. One of the things that stands out to me is a lack of trust in the self, questioning self-doubt, and that can manifest itself in a whole range of symptoms that clients come to me with, maybe anxiety or depression. And as our relationship and trust is established, they begin to reveal deeper rooted issues that have been of a sexual nature, sometimes with family members or close family friends. That seems to be right at the nub of their challenges, and there's been what I call a muteness about that experience, and sometimes an utter surprise that this is being unearthed in therapy, when actually what I came for was not related to sexual abuse in any way, shape or form.
And despite the awareness that now people have generally, it still requires a considerable amount of courage for the individual to step forward and say that I was abused, and they'll come to me and they'll say that they've never spoken about this before, and where do they start? And it's not unusual for me to be the first person that they've begun to open up to, even before they go to the police. And for me, we need to work harder to encourage people who are still suffering to feel that they can find a safe place and a haven where that they will be supported. And my experience is, in terms of certainly the police these days, that they are doing a fantastic job. They have specialist officers who provide specific facilities to make the process as comfortable as possible. And of course, I do the same thing when I meet with someone. But I mean, you too. It takes a long time to gain the trust of someone so that they feel that they're able to talk openly and fully about what happened to them. And again, you'll know better than I, but it's only once they've done that then you can begin to really help them sort of move towards the future and concentrate that, rather than carrying this baggage around for years and years and years, as they are already often done.
I think one of the challenges, the massive challenges, is the guilt and shame. And that is such a blocker and is an internal conflict that my clients have struggled with. And that is present in the room. Sometimes I might have a hunch that something may have happened, but it's a very delicate walk. But also, there's also a concern that if they tell me, that I'll breach confidentiality and report the incident, which is not the case. It's about providing a safe space for a client to explore and begin to articulate that adverse experience that's happened to them. And I think that's what's so exciting about us working in partnership together, is that if a client does decide that they want to take criminal proceedings against their persecutor, then I'm in a better place to be able to refer on and likewise, so that they're clear that there is a process should they decide that actually they want to take legal action. And I think that's always a concern, that if I tell you, will you go and report?
Yeah. Again, I find the same thing in terms of people come to me and they're then worried that the moment they say something that's going to enter the public domain, as of course if you and I know, that it remains between me and the person I'm talking to, and if they don't want to take it any further, they don't have to. And they are in control, and that's I think the concern is that they've not had that before, and that they will be not taken advantage of, but they will just lose that ability to control what's going on into the future. So they need to be looked after quite carefully, as you identify, and with you too, that just because they'll come and see you doesn't mean it's suddenly that others are going to learn about what's happening, because that just remains within you, and them. There is no need for them to worry about that. So I think we need to encourage people to come forward more, because just as we would not hesitate in seeking medical help if we broke our leg, the same way when it comes to mental health issues, we should instantly think about where can we get that help and where should we go to, because whilst it's a different issue, it's a significantly different issue in terms of mental health, it is important to be directed towards and receive the right treatment early on, or as early as possible, to ensure that you get the best possible outcome.
Indeed, most definitely. And I think about all the documentaries I've seen with women who have experienced sexual abuse and how it manifests in their life, as well as men as well who've been sexually abused. And for me, like I said, it's the behaviours that can be shaped by a traumatic experience that then is buried and potentially shoved under the carpet. And then you get the behaviours, for example, repeating patterns that are unhelpful, or having unhealthy relationships, or just utter self-sabotage. That is the root cause is often linked to a traumatic event that hasn't been explored, that's been muted, and so it then seeps through into the behaviour in ways that sabotage the individual.
And when one looks at an awareness and thinking about what needs to be done about this, part of the understanding I feel that the media and government needs is the whole idea that, as I've said before, it's not just a case of when the abuse stops, the effects do not stop. It affects, as we know, and you know better than I do, those personal relationships. But beyond that, it affects their capacity for learning and work, and that then has a potential impact on society as a whole, because clearly if someone is not able to form good relationships, is not able to work and hold down a position, they become potentially a risk and a burden to society, in the sense that they either potentially fall into the criminal justice system, and then find it impossible to escape, potentially impossible to escape, or that even if they escape that, when they're in the workplace, they're not able to hold down a job for a long period of time, they're not able to progress, not able to sustain long-term relationships. And again, that has a wider impact on society, both in terms of health issues, possibly welfare benefit issues too. So, it is that coming back to the importance of, when we're reminding people to be alive to Sexual Abuse Awareness Week, it's not about reporting it, it's about thinking more and concentrating and focusing much more on the survivor of abuse, rather than, for me, paedophiles and abusers, which the media particularly appear to be obsessed with. We should be concentrating as much time as a society and as much money towards the survivors of abuse. And one area that really sort of makes me particularly angry is the fact that society as a whole, the government, spends about $30,000 a year, very roughly, on locking up a paedophile or abuser, but spend nowhere near that much state-wise when seeking to or trying to support a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. It's frequently reported, individuals who are referred by their GP for NHS counselling will simply obtain maybe half a dozen or a dozen counselling sessions. Sometimes those are in group sessions, which is clearly, in my limited experience, far from ideal. They need one-to-one support, which is where you can come in and help them. But we need that greater awareness, particularly as far as the government is concerned, so that they can put in adequate funds to ensure that people are properly cared for. As we know, in the long term, there is no way that the NHS will be able to meet the needs of childhood sexual abuse victims. But the state, working in partnership with the private sector, can do that. But to begin with, we've got to ensure that people feel confident enough in order to come forward and seek help, whether it's, first of all, from you as a therapist, or alternatively it's from me as a lawyer, giving that generic advice about what potentially they can do and how they can be helped.
Indeed, and I think for me, just to kind of echo what you were saying, is the root is a lack of self-love. And I think that ultimately is what I've witnessed that sexual abuse does to an individual. The self-love element for an individual is compromised. And when that is compromised, it manifests itself in so many different harmful ways in an individual's